entertaining talking sports.
What is going on, football fans? Back at it with another New York Giants video. Before I get started on the video, just want to let everybody know I will be live tonight on Bad Dog Sports for Talking Giants. We do that each and every week. We'll be over on that channel later tonight. So come on over there, do that. I'll probably do a Q&A tomorrow. I haven't done one of those where I get to talk to exclusively the chat. Probably do one of those tomorrow. But in this video, well, I took a couple of days off YouTube the last couple of days. Well, yesterday was my only day off. But I wanted to think about why the New York Giants are where they are. And I really wanted to take a step back because I, like a lot of New York Giants fans, were very upset with the effort that the New York Giants displayed in that third football game. And you know what? I started to get negative. And I don't like to be that way. I came into this year with a realistic approach. I came into this year telling you guys that we weren't going to the playoffs. I came into this year telling you guys that we were going to get off to a slow start. And at the end of the day, that's exactly what's happened. Was last week inexcusable? Absolutely. And for fans that don't want to take quote-unquote moral victories, well, this season's just not for you. Because that is what this season is going to be about if you were being realistic going into the year. This was a team that we all knew was not going to the playoffs. This was a team that we all knew had a bunch of young players. They had a brand new scheme on both sides of the ball. They had young players that were going to have to get acclimated to it. They had no preseason. I've been all over what you guys call excuses, but it's just realistic. This was a team that was not ready to compete this year. And they were bringing in a 38-year-old coach who had never coached. And I'm going to give you guys a little bit of optimism for the rest of the season and why I think it's very possible that this New York Giants team could get better over the course of the season. I'm also going to point out what I feel is by far the New York Giants' biggest problem right now as to winning football games. And that doesn't mean that I'm not putting blame on Daniel Jones. That doesn't mean that I'm not putting blame on the coaching staff. But there is one huge factor as to why I think, above all else, why the New York Giants are not winning football games. I'm going to talk about that as well. The first thing I wanted to talk about was the 2019 Miami Dolphins. The 2019 Miami Dolphins, everybody came into the year with the phrase tank for Tua. They thought they were a team that would win 0 games, maybe 1, and they definitely exceeded expectations last year. They ended up winning 5 games with a rookie head coach, similar to that of Joe Judge with Brian Flores, coming over from the New England Patriots with no experience. Well, if you go back and look at the Miami Dolphins last year, their first 7 games, and keep in mind they had a full preseason. They had time to get acclimated to one another. Of course, they had new schemes. They brought in a completely new coaching staff, but they had a full offseason to get acclimated to one another. That team started 0-7. They lost their first 7 games by a combined score of 197-77. They scored 77 points over their first 7 games. They averaged 11 points a contest. And they took time to get acclimated to one another. They took time to get used to one another. They were losing their games on average like 28-11. I think in their first 3 contests, they were outscored like 130 to like 10. Like it was that bad. And they were not a good football team over those first 7 games. Now, they weren't a great football team over the last 9, but over the last 9, they won 5. They went 5-4 down the stretch, and they brought hope for the franchise going forward. So much hope that some people pointed to the fact that they thought Brian Flores deserved some consideration for Coach of the Year. That's how much better they performed than what people thought going into the year. And I'm not going to tell you here, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that we're going to win 5 out of our last 9. But I am going to tell you that I believe that this team could get a hell of a lot better over the second half of the season and give you guys hope going forward into the 2021 season. And at the end of the day, that's what this season is all about. Regardless of where we finish in the draft, regardless of who we end up picking in the first round, we want to leave this season saying to ourselves, this is a team that we could see starting to progress and do some damage in the 2021 season and hopefully going forward after that. But it's going to take time. We knew going into the year, if you were realistic, that this team was going to come out struggling and it was going to take some time for this team to become what we hoped it could be by year's end, which is a competitive football team, a team that's not going to go out there and get embarrassed, a team that can compete against good football teams. And they're certainly going to be put to the test this week. The LA Rams are not going to be easy. We don't match up well in this contest. And to be honest with you, I don't think we're ready to stack up with a team like that, especially on the road. We'll see. Maybe they'll put forth a valiant effort, and maybe we come up with a huge upset. I'm certainly not picking it. There's a reason that we're a 12-point favorite in Vegas, 12-point underdog rather, in Vegas. But in terms of what the biggest problem is for this football team, at least in my opinion, and I know that you guys, you, all have different opinions as to what you think the primary reason is. Some people say it's Joe Judge, it's the play calling, it's the coaching staff. And I suppose that's fair. What I'll say about Joe Judge, the guy's only 3 games into his entire career. And he was handed a roster that wasn't very good to begin with, and he didn't have time to institute his scheme on both offense and defense with his play callers. So you had to expect a slow start, at least in my opinion. Other people, of course, will point to the quarterback. The two most popular people, and I've learned this over my lifetime when it comes to following the New York Giants, that people want to point to when things aren't going good is the two most important positions, and that's the head coach and that's the quarterback. And by no means am I telling you that Daniel Jones has been good. He hasn't. Daniel Jones has made crucial mistakes. He needs to get a lot better, like a lot of the other players on this roster. He showed us spurts, but he's also cost us some games with some of the things that he's done. There's no doubt about it. Now, is he the primary reason why we're playing as poorly as we are on offense? In my opinion, no. I think he needs help, and he doesn't have it. He doesn't have any wide receivers really to throw to, but the most important thing, there is zero. And I mean zero. And it's been bad in the past, but it's never been this bad, at least through the first 3 weeks. There is zero balance on offense because the offensive line cannot run block. And until such time they can, and until such time they can provide some kind of balanced offense, the New York Giants are going nowhere. That defense needs to be masked a bit. I've talked about that before the year started. They're still young, they're still underdeveloped, and they're going to get exposed against good offenses. And the best way to do that is to be able to control the clock. Well, the New York Giants have come nowhere near that. I've talked about on third down, they haven't been able to convert. But when you look at the ground game stats, it is embarrassing. And the Giants have been near the league's worst for the last 10 years because of how poor this offensive line has been, and it's because they missed on draft picks, it's because they've had no continuity, whether it's Eric Flowers, whether it's bringing in free agents like Jeff Schwartz, whether it's bringing in guys like Nate Solder. It has not worked over the last decade. And the New York Giants, to their credit, and I was very happy, this year focused heavily on that in the draft. They brought in a good offensive line coach, or a guy that we thought was a good offensive line coach, with Mark Colombo from the Dallas Cowboys. But it's going to take time. You think back to those great Giants offensive lines, it took years for them to get acclimated to one another and start to play well. And it's why I think this team, much like the Dolphins, could definitely be a much better team over the second half. Because I do think this offensive line, as they grow together, should get better over the course of the weeks. So far, not so good, right? Everybody's ranked 55 or worse on the 58 or worse, actually. Fleming's moved up a bit on PFF outside of Kevin Zeitler. Andrew Thomas is a 55 right now. He's struggled. He's given up pressures. He's given up sacks, which is what you expect from a rookie left tackle. You knew it wasn't going to be picture perfect going into the year, but it's been really bad. Right now, if you look at the rushing stats in football, the New York Giants are averaging 57 yards a game on the ground. And I'm going to break it down even further. But 50 yards a game on the ground in itself is bad. I went to ESPN. I went all the way back to 2004. There hasn't been a team since 2004 that's averaged less than 70 yards a game on the ground for a whole season. So right now, the New York Giants are on pace to absolutely shatter that, to be the worst rushing offense maybe ever, but definitely since 2004. That's as far back as ESPN goes. Now it gets even worse. In those rushing yards, in which you had Saquon Barkley for the first game and a half, Daniel Jones has 92 of the 170 yards on the ground that the New York Giants have been able to put up over the first three contests, meaning that the running backs have only produced 78 yards on 41 carries. Now, if you remember correctly, Saquon Barkley had 28 yards on 4 carries in his second contest. So if you take that out of it, the New York Giants on 37 carries have 50 yards. That's how bad it's been. The New York Giants have not been able to have a balanced attack at all. They're averaging 1.9 yards a carry from the running back position, and they're dead last in the league at 3.2 yards a carry. They're dead last in the league in rushing attempts with 53, and they're dead last in the league in rushing yards with 170, and it's not even close. Also, if you look at the metrics, the offensive line has a stuff rate far worse than anybody else. The New York Giants are getting stuffed on 35% of their carries. The next worst is 29%. This offensive line is by far, in my opinion, the team's biggest reason why we're losing football games. And until such time they mature and get better, you're not going to see this offense take off. You're not going to see this offense mature and get better. And we have to hope and we have to pray that this offensive line gets better week in and week out. And maybe the New York Giants will have to move some guys around. Maybe they won't be getting the job done. We'll see if and when Joe Judge decides to do that. There were talks that he may move on from Nick Gates at the center spot. He will remain there this week. He has struggled mightily. He has a PFF grade of 49, and at times he looks lost out there. Make no mistake about it. We'll see if and when Matt Barrett does enter the lineup. But until such time this offensive line takes a step forward, Daniel Jones, the ground game, the offense as a whole, you're not going to see even a decent offense. Right now, we're by far the worst offense in the league. I'll go back to my initial point, though, and why I have some hope for this team. The Miami Dolphins last year, it took a long time for them to hit their stride. And then they went into this year with a lot of hope and a lot of optimism. They brought in a new quarterback, but they provided him with a team ready to build. They spent a lot in free agency. They gave him pieces. They are 1-2 to start the year, but they're coming off a nice win last week. But the Dolphins finished strong. And maybe the New York Giants could mature and get better over the last half of the season. And that's all we can hope as Giants fans. And I think they will. As always, guys, if you liked what you watched, please subscribe. Drop a comment. Maybe give me a little thumbs up. Cheers.